Welcome to the Fixing Incentives podcast, where we talk about the incentives that drive success. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi, David Malaman here. I'm the host of Fixing Incentives podcast, where I talk with top business leaders about their journey and the behavior that powered their growth. I have with me today a really, really awesome guest. But before I get to that, let me just jump into the sponsor message. This episode is brought to you by Tenfold Traffic. The only projects I take on currently would be a performance-based relationship. What that means is all marketing would go through me on my own dime, and we negotiate a revenue share. In general, I don't want someone to give me money if I'm not generating them a return. But if I'm making someone a ton of money, then I want to share in the revenue. So I really just want to participate in the full value I'm creating. And, in general, I can only work with one or two clients a year because I really pour my heart and soul into crushing it for them. So an ideal partner would have to have some sort of converting funnel that can really handle scale. So both on the operations side and the website side. So if you're a company that knows your lifetime value of a client and wants to spend as much as you can to acquire a customer that you can dominate the market, you're probably the type of partner I'm looking for. Today I have with me Duncan Alney here, the founder of Firebelly Marketing, which this is really interesting. They're independently rated by Clutch as the #1 social media agency globally, which is a really fascinating thing because social media has been kind of a mystery for me. So first, how you doing, Duncan? Welcome.
David, I'm so excited to be here. I'm a big fan of yours, and we belong to the same agency mastermind, where we bear all our secrets. And David, you are, known as the cerebral guy in the mastermind, the guy who does thoughtful, considerate responses to help people solve their problems. So I'm super excited to be on your podcast.
That's very kind of you to say. I'm going to have to start being a little less helpful. But I'm really excited. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. So just first, I'm always fascinated by this. How did you get started in social media marketing, or, how did you start your agency? What kind of led you down that path?
Yeah, that's a great question, David, and one that I love talking about. So I am a longtime brand marketing guy, and I've worked in the agency world, for most of my career, but on the client side a couple of times, and most of my career on the agency side. I've done all the jobs, from creative to account management to business development. So it made sense for me to start my own thing. And then after being kind of a solopreneur and outsourcing, before outsourcing was cool, I was starting to get very frustrated with the website and SEO world. And just keeping up with the learning curve was very difficult. And so I just hired a couple of employees. And one of my colleagues said to me, wouldn't it be fun to get into something completely new? And how about social media? And funnily enough, at that time, I had resisted MySpace because that was all that was out at the time. And I had resisted it. And so we jumped into it and used MySpace. MySpace actually had geo-targeting back in the day, and we used MySpace to geo-target people that were likely to like a certain kind of restaurant that was opening. And so I did the PR on one side, and then we did the MySpace targeting. And the PR got them a couple of stories, on Fox affiliate and the CBS affiliate or whatever. And there were 200 people waiting in line when they opened their doors, and the kitchen was swamped and they couldn't keep up. And so it just kind of solidified to me that was a great, that was in, 2000 and early 2007. Yeah. And then later on, Facebook opened up, and the whole world changed. But, we have always focused on doing solid work, and actually doing solid work that is profitable, what then became the crux, which we've now solved. So it's been a great journey.
So you've been there since the beginning. It sounds like on the social media side. I don't know if you know this, but I saw a very interesting stat. It's been about a year since I looked it up, but I'm sure it's still around there. Did you know that MySpace.com still gets around 5 million visitors a month?
That is amazing. I did know that it was still popular. I believe it's still very popular with people looking for emerging music. And I believe Justin Timberlake is one of the owners. So, they went from being one of the highest valued social properties when Facebook was still emerging to being, I think, but it's still a solid place. I mean, 5 million users a month, ain't nothing to joke about.
Yeah, I don't know much about what it might even just be like a news site or something. I'm not sure. I just know that I was looking it up and I was fascinated by that number. It's really interesting. MySpace was like a Swiss Army knife. You could do anything with your page. So that was always like people, I almost think of it like the back of laptops. Sometimes people have their bumper stickers and stuff like that. You could just like, you could express yourself any way you want. So that was really cool. So, this has been a challenge for me. I'm curious if you face this challenge. Emerging platforms, Clubhouse, I feel like shot up, and then I don't know if it's still popular or not. I actually think it still is, even though I don't really use it. But then, TikTok a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, started advertising aggressively on Facebook. And it was clear that they had legs. And, obviously a lot of that was built off of what Vine did really well back in the day. And so a lot of platforms come and go, and some obviously have staying power. But I'm curious, do you find it a challenge to, stay ahead of the curve with whatever is emerging tomorrow or today? Or has your specialty, because it's been so driven by the business metrics and really driving revenue, has it really been kind of fundamental that we go to where our audience is?
Yeah, that's a very good question, a deep question, and yeah, you do go where the audience is, and I think the challenge that when it comes to new platforms, the challenge that brands face is, based on kind of where they are with their, approach to market leadership. Are they first in a place, or are they a follower, or are they late to the space? And any of those is fine, but TikTok is kind of uniquely challenging because it is sort of like a very layered, deep version of Twitter in a way, because it's in the moment, it's hyper relevant, and the audience is very engaged, and the audience is growing. It's skewing older now. And for example, my partner, Jeremy King, spends hours and hours and hours on TikTok. He's 47, and so the question becomes like, how do you get into a hyper relevant platform, and how do you monetize it, not just from a sales standpoint, but also from an awareness and engagement standpoint. And the biggest kind of challenge with that space is because it's so hyper relevant, and because it needs video content, it's a very heavy lift for brands, who are typically strapped. I mean, even big brands are strapped with infrastructure, process, protocol, and especially the people, right? It's like, how do you produce stuff that's so irrelevant, and how do you not fail and just seem completely out of step and irrelevant? So I think that's the challenge. I mean, there are ways around it. I mean, you can work with creators who work on behalf of your brand. You can work with brand ambassadors or influencers, or I know we were just looking at a major restaurant chain that's doing some really interesting stuff in their kitchen. So they're actually going behind the scenes and showing what's happening at the dish level in their kitchen. And they're actually not complicated videos. It's just very transparent, and they're talking about, here's how we do it, here's what gives it the kick, so putting it all out there. But I mean, this is the same thing we dealt with in 2007 and 2008, 2009, even 2010, where the question was, what is social media? It wasn't like, how can I use it and why should I use it? It's like, what is it? And the question now is why? Why do you want to be on there, and what should you be doing? And our answer, the vice president of our company, Chad Richards, wrote this kind of mission for us years ago, which is, we're on there to be, we're there to help brands be more likable and be more profitable. And what a concept, right? It's a play on words, obviously, because people like things in terms of their interactions, but brands that are likable tend to do better. And the IRS is never going to be likable, but the IRS is credible. So you don't have to be likable. You could be credible. I mean, if you're likable and credible, that's great. But I feel like the two reasons to be on social media are because you want to manage your image and you want to generate revenue. And so it's interesting how you can use organic and ads to do both of those things, using a funnel approach, but you can use ads there. The tracking is really good. There's new technologies that are now overcoming, iOS and Facebook's limitations with attribution. And so, I think you have with search, with paid search, and with social and paid social, you have, and of course with the influencers that are using all this stuff, you have an interesting kind of set of ingredients at your disposal. If you think of marketing like cooking, it's like I want to get a dish that's going to be delicious and healthy and is going to be loved by the people that eat it. What do I use? I can't cook it. I'm going to buy it and serve it on my plate. I'm going to start it from scratch. Regardless, it's like you're doing the same thing, right? You're focused on the result. But I think what we as marketeers, and I know that you're big on this, is you want to present with accountability. And so when you're able to tell, even if it's not with complete certainty, like here's what I did in terms of getting in front of the right people. Here's what I did in terms of engaging with the right people. Here's what I did in terms of driving traffic to your website or driving traffic to your location. And then here's the associated revenue. The revenue tracking, of course, is the golden fleece, right? It's the
right.
David, you're much smarter than me. What is it? The grail. It's the grail, right? And it's always elusive to us. And so I always say like some tracking is better than no tracking. So if I can, if you're in a physical location, there's ways to track it. It doesn't always work, but you can ask questions when people come in, or I guess you could also just stand at the edge of the ocean and know the waves coming in without understanding wave mechanics. So that revenue is up, and these are the things you're doing. So I think that's basically. I know it's a really long answer, but I think to sum it up, it's like you do social to be likable or credible or both, and to generate revenue.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is, I'm noticing now, only recently, that the really smart brands are starting to move away from channel attribution in terms of effectiveness of their budgets. My feeling in general is attribution is a good comparison tool. If you have limited resources, you need to decide where to allocate it. But it really should never be in the context of like, is this working or is it not? Because relationships are dynamic things, and relationships with customers are dynamic, and brands are almost living organisms. So what ends up happening is when you force yourself to have the tracking in order to rely on it, you end up missing part of that human element, and you can't measure the other side of it. The example I give, and it's a little personal, but I'm married for 11 years without kids. So, fertility issues is a topic I'm familiar with. And it's a very, very deep, painful thing. My younger brother had a daughter a couple of years ago. And like the next day, Amazon was targeting me with baby gift ads. Now, I'm not connected to my brother in any way on Amazon, even though he's not on social media at all. So I don't know how they did that. Maybe it was luck of the draw. Maybe it's, they're showing the ads to everybody, and I just happen to be, it's that confirmation bias because it's on my mind, I see it. But for about a month and a half, I refused to buy anything from Amazon because that cut deep. Because it's really bittersweet when you struggle with infertility and a brother who's 10 years younger than you has his first kid. And then like to have this like ad just like invading your privacy saying like, hey, why don't you buy him a gift? And I'm just like, why don't you go jump in the lake, Amazon? So like you can't measure the other side of all the interactions, all the people that didn't convert, all the impressions that didn't convert. You can't really measure that. So I feel like when you're dealing with like becoming likable, you really have to follow the golden rule first and foremost, right? You really just have to, walk a mile in the customer's shoes and ask, like, if I was the customer, would I appreciate this interaction? And then let the
that's
tracking.
Very true.
Yeah, no, I think the tracking is better as just kind of like a directional signal of like, either relative to itself, is it improving or not, or things like that. But there's also ways to measure it. I did a brand study for a brand once with some YouTube ads. I don't know if you've run brand studies for some of your clients, but there's some interesting data there. There's definitely. I feel almost like the tracking that they want isn't because they even want it. It's because they need something to tell their boss to make their boss feel like they're doing a good job.
Yeah. I often think of my friend Steve Hirschberger said to me that most marketing people don't want to do great things; they just don't want to get fired. And it's interesting because you use the data points, and you can make all kinds of decisions based on data. But if I'll just use a super overgeneralized example, if we went by data points alone, we would never have had an airplane. We would never have had a record player. Would never have had an iPhone. There's so many things. I mean, the instinct and belief are playing. I mean, I don't know how you measure that, but it's like I don't know who said, but you got to tell the customer what they want, right? So I think it's interesting because and the other challenge with attribution and tracking is that it can be very inaccurate too. And so depending on your methodology for attribution. If it's not multi-touch and if it's not assigning percentage values and weighting, it's like you think that, okay, so it came off the Google ad was the last touch. And so let's spend more money on Google. But really they saw the reviews and they went to your Facebook page and they went to your website, and it was the video on the website that really convinced them, but the Google ad retargeted them. So Google ad gets all the credit, right? But that's not accurate.
I'm laughing because I just read in a book from someone in the PPC industry how he only takes clients that are already spending a ton of money on social media marketing for paid search, because he says search is really about demand capture, not demand generation. And so
that's really great. I love that. I mean, and it's intrusive, right? As opposed to search, which is intentional. I mean, I should say disruptive. Like social is disruptive. So when you're thinking about demand generation, like you can find all the people that know you or that know what they're looking for, but all those bastards out there that don't know that you exist, it's like, how are you going to get in front of them? And so social becomes now, I've never considered that, you could have a super negative impact on someone based on subjective factors that you don't know about in your targeting, right? So that's something I'd never really thought about. That's really interesting because I always thought about the flip side, which is the synchronicity, which is at play both negatively and positively here. But the positive synchronicity is like, hey, oh my gosh, I didn't know that I needed, a charger for my new Apple AirPod Pros. And how great of you to send that to me, I'm going to buy it immediately. But on the other hand, the fertility piece is deeply personal, subjective. It really pisses you off. And really like what Amazon, whatever your monthly value is to Amazon, was just shattered by one bad ad.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. It's a great question.
Yeah. I want to be mindful of your time, and I want to make sure people can find you. So I know firebellymarketing.com.
Firebellymarketing.com, yeah. And I'm Firebelly Man on Instagram. I'm Firebelly on Twitter. Duncan Alney on LinkedIn. I'm not super active on Twitter. I'm active on LinkedIn and Instagram. The company really focuses on helping brands be more likable and profitable. And we work a lot with food and beverage companies. We work with other passion clients.
Thanks so much for being here, Duncan. I really appreciate your time, and everybody, you should really, if you have a serious brand in food and beverage and you want to be more likable and more profitable, definitely reach out to Duncan and follow him across those social channels. Or visit firebellymarketing.com. Thanks so much. Thanks for listening to the Fixing Incentives podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Fixing Incentives podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.